So Build Back Better puts more money into the economy, but doesn't do as much with respect to creating a sort of engine for organic growth in the future. And I think that's the problem. In fact, that's where the recipe for inflation comes, at least in my mind. I want to bring in Bianco Research President Jim Bianco because, Jim, something tells me that Jay Powell and Joe Manchin would like to see Build Back just kind of go away. There's a lot of moving parts down in Washington, D.C., a lot of efforts to get more money into this economy. What are your thoughts?
That's kind of the problem, that we've put too much money into the economy to begin with. You know, in the previous segment, you talked about that the American public now is getting hyper concerned about it. Well, where was the downside? There wasn't one, because there was a side. And that downside is actually falling on the majority party, the Democrats. So the more that they pump money into the economy, the more inflation they get, the worse the public feels, and they take it out on the president's approval rating or the approval rating of Congress. So now all of a sudden there's a pushback. So I know Wall Street wants, the Fed to just pump money forever and push stocks to the sky. What's the harm? The harm is inflation now. That's the game changer here. And it's going to be very difficult for them moving forward and deciding what they want to do. They can't just decide one-way street now. Let's just print money to fix every problem, because there is a consequence. Right.
And in the meantime, the other big story for the month of December is on the COVID front. You track this information better than anyone. I saw a graph today, and I thought about you on the Omicron variant. It's in the same area, right? The spread is at the same peaking point for the previous two waves. So it looks like we're at a critical moment. If history repeats itself, we'll be okay. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, if history repeats itself to some respect, because Europe's at a new all-time high, the world is at a 3-month high, that probably by January, the U.S. case count will probably be peaking back at its all-time high, similar to where we saw in a year ago in January. Now, yes, Omicron is not supposed to be as much of a health risk, but it is very contagious. But my bigger concern about that is politicians react to case counts. That's how they decide policy, whether it's de Blasio with vaccinations in New York or it's mask mandates with Newsom in California. We get case counts to double from here in the next month or two, they're going to restrict the economy even more at exactly a point when we don't need it. We've got too much inflation, got too many things going on. The last thing we need to do is force everybody back into the basement. We won't call it restrictions. We'll call it restrictions. We'll call it rational safety measures. But in fact, what it'll be restrictions on the economy.
In the meantime, though, you had the two CEOs from two of the biggest airlines in the world saying that we don't even really need masks on airlines. So we're getting public pushback from this, and still, you think, understanding the dangers of shutting down our economy, that might be the knee-jerk response.
You're right that there will be certain blue states that will be more willing to want to put on restrictions, like California, New York, Illinois, and red states won't. But it will be just enough restrictions just from the blue states alone that it will hurt the economy. Sure, they won't do it in Florida. They won't do it in Texas. They won't do it in the Southeast. But they will do it in California, New York, Illinois, and that will be enough to hurt the whole economy.
Jim, let me ask you about Speaker Pelosi. She was yesterday made a comment. She's consistent, right? Before in the past, she's talked about food stamps in the masses, and saying, hey, let's pump up the food stamps program for people. In the meantime, she's at the same time saying, hey, let's not get rid of the option of congressional members and their families buying the market, right? I mean, it's just a lot of chutzpah in my mind. It's okay, food stamps for you, but we can buy a whole bunch of out-of-the-money calls on NVIDIA and make millions of dollars. I know we've talked about this before. Is there any hope that we could get Congress to curtail trading or stop trading? Because I got to tell you, this is one thing that crosses every political line. I haven't spoken to anyone, Republican, Democrat, young or old, that doesn't think that this smells like rotten.
Of course, because we're not congressmen and we don't get the inside information and we don't get to make a lot of money on it. Yes, it should be stopped. Yes, it does undermine the integrity of the institution. Yes, it does undermine the integrity of the government. And the same problem with the Federal Reserve. We had that problem a few months ago with the same thing with them going on, too. It should be stopped, but it's such a windfall for congressmen. It's going to be very difficult to get them to vote themselves the inability to make the money that they've been making on this.
This is so mind-boggling. Jim, thanks a lot. Always appreciate our conversations.
Thank you.
So, folks, later in the hour, how one